Hi, welcome to the March 16th, 2021 Club Cubase live stream. So we'll get started in just a couple minutes. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure everything is coming through on my end, on my test monitoring computer. Hi, welcome to the... All right, everything sounds good there. My name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could ask questions in a live chat field, or you could just simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. We will try to go through all the questions chronologically, so we'll try to get through as many questions as we can today. I may have to, there's a slight chance I may have to go a little shorter today to pick up my son from school. My wife has an appointment today, and if it runs a little bit late, I may have to be the one that picks up my son from school. So I just wanted to give a heads up about that. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for the Steinberg U.S. distributor, Yamaha Corporation of America. I'm based in the United States, just outside Washington, D.C. in Alexandria, Virginia. For those that are watching the Hangout live, if you want to just tell us who you are and where you're from, and then we'll get started. We'll get some people logged in. Also, if this is your first Hangout, make sure that you let us know that. And we'll get to started with all the questions in just a moment. I'm going to clear my throat and mute my mic. Hang on. All right, so... there's a couple of other little stuff that could be helpful. We will try to get through as many questions as we can. The ability for people to ask questions can far exceed my ability to answer them in real time. So if you have a question, I'll try to catch up to it. If you have a question, you don't get an immediate response, please if we could try to refrain from asking the same question repeatedly, it won't speed up the response to the question. It just kind of slows down the whole Hangout a bit. So if we could try to avoid that. Also, while you're asking questions, if you can maybe clarify if you're running, Cubase Pro 11 on Mac, or you're running Cubase Elements 10 on Windows, that information in your operating system and which version of Cubase that you're using. So, but we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Let's go ahead and see who is on the Hangout. So, all right, so we see we have Crown the Artist from St. Lucia. I was on vacation there a couple years ago in Marigot Bay. It's a beautiful island. Took my son to the volcano. You like that? All right, so we see Sir Robert from Atlanta. We have Ace Amadeus from Texas. We have Rob from Tarpon Springs, Florida. All right, Tim from Mission Viejo. It's great to see you on the on Saturday's Zoom meeting, as well as Uno from Finland. He was on as well. All right, and Soren from Sweden. All right, we have John Costigan, he was on, so from Kenosha. All right, so we have Agent K. So I know we had in some parts of the world, we had our daylight savings time in the United States, but I don't think it's happened in Europe yet. So we may have some people joining us in an hour from Europe. So we'll see how it goes. All right, so we have Matt from London. We have Scott from Racine, Wisconsin. All right, we have Jazz Dude. All right, so we have Keith Hirsch, one of my colleagues at Yamaha. Great to see you on a Hangout, Keith. All right, so we have Captenergy Music, all right, from Harrisburg, and also from Pennsylvania. We have Taylor from Pine Grove, just north of Harrisburg. All right, so we have Kent from Sequim, Washington. All right, so we have someone from Kiev. All right. All right, so we have Sub 403. All right, so we have D Brown's the first Hangout today. Welcome to the Hangout. Feel free to ask any questions. All right, so we have Belgium, Senegal. All right, so Jan from Stockholm, who's been kind enough to do the CubaseIndex.com, where you can just kind of do searches for any questions that have been covered on the Hangouts. All right, so we have Theodore from London. We have from Istanbul. Okay, so we'll wait just another minute or two and then go ahead and get started. Okay. All right, so we have Exodus from Paris. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with some of our questions. All right, so we have Crown the artist from St. Lucia in the Caribbean. Use Cubase 11 artists and noticed audio alignment isn't on there. Is there an alternative way to group align audio on Cubase 11 artist? So with Cubase Pro, you could just, we could do different aspects where we could align audio to kind of match the timing of two different sources. Like, it's often used on background vocals or multiple guitar solos, something that's kind of rhythmically intricate. And we have this audio alignment panel. So there really isn't a equivalent to Cubase in Cubase 11 Artist for that, but you could probably, by time you would purchase a third-party solution to accomplish that, you'd probably could just upgrade from your Cubase Artist to Cubase Pro 11 to get that functionality and lots of other functionality. But there's no real way within the artist version to do group aligning of like one audio file to another. Okay, so a question from Ace Amadeus. Hi, Greg. I hope you and your family are well. I've filled up my hard drive in Cubase 10.5. What is the proper way to move and / route my large Hallion expansions, Groove Agent, custom drums to external SSD? So if there's a little utility that will be installed with Cubase, and it's going to be called the Steinberg Library Manager. And really all you have to do is you could go to all of your Groove Agent sounds, and this will work for all of your factory sounds. So I could select these and then just click on Move. And if you wanted to just come over here and just, move, you could specify a new folder. So if you wanted to take, like maybe have a smaller capacity solid state drive as your system drive, and then you are wanting to you purchase like an external drive or a larger drive to hold all the samples, you could choose all of your Hallion libraries here and just move those. You could define kind of a default folder, but your Groove Agent, all of your Cubase content, all the different loop sets and sound effects, all those can be just simply just select and move and specify the new folder. And then as you are working, that way the links between where Cubase goes to look for the samples, for all the instruments, all the loops, will automatically be tied. So just look for a little utility that's installed with Cubase called the Steinberg Library Manager. And that could, greatly facilitate the ease of moving all of your content libraries to another drive. All right, so hey Greg, I've been working with Bias FX2 and Cubase 11 Pro recently. Do you have any tips achieving better guitar tones with amp simulators, especially metal tones? Thanks. So a lot of times, there's sometimes, and I see this with a lot of my guitar playing friends, that they tend to rehearse alone. And as they practice, they may not practice, when they're doing it alone. And sometimes what could be a full featured sounding production. So let me just make sure I have this set up. Going out of my Yamaha speakers here so you guys could hear. So a lot of times what I see mistakes in is as people are using like amp simulators is the guitar players, when they're listening to the guitar by itself, they tend to have more frequencies, like, you know, they'll have more low end and more high end to make the guitar sound, you know, more full. They'll often have kind of more frequency spectrum. But in context of a mix, you know, the guitar amps are going to be very much in mid-range. And in talking to, you know, when I hear guitar players talking, they're like, oh, I have so much low end and so much, you know, of this going on frequency-wise. But you realize that most of their energy is going to be in the mid-range. And as they work in the mid-range, that you want to figure out that each instrument, you know, if we're to kind of look at a mix, you may say, okay, like if we're to think of a drum set, you have like your kick, low toms, snare, hi-hat, cymbals, and they're kind of spread across the harmonic spectrum. So a lot of people, when they're doing some guitar stuff, try to take the whole harmonic spectrum instead of just their little piece of the pie. So the bass may have his little piece of the pie. The keyboard player may have theirs, you know, and the guitars and keyboards and vocals often have to kind of sit within the same frequencies. So, you know, I see a lot of people trying to have too broad of a frequency spectrum and wondering why it doesn't kind of fit in the mix as well, where if you kind of just concentrate on particular frequencies, you know, like on this example, you know, I have my two guitar parts. And then if I wanted to just open up, let's say my VST amp rack, this is the amp that we're hearing. So if I wanted to now look at this VST amp rack, so at this point, this is our, you know, direct guitar sounds. And then as I turn this on, so with this, I have these panned, you know, like the two guitar parts panned hard left and hard right. And then I could have their effects kind of panned in the opposite channel. But if you want to listen to that kind of in context. But I'll be back again until the next time. It's not the end. Hit the road. And we're bypass the effects in context. No control. Hit the road. Gonna rock. Gonna roll. And now we'll bring in the amp rack. So, you know, beware of kind of the frequency range. Some people just go, you know, also with any, you know, like more metal tones, you know, some people just go too much distortion, and you want to, you know, sometimes just dial the distortion back a little bit and make it fit better in the context. So, you know, try to carve out the frequency spectrums, try panning, you know, hard left, hard right if you have like two parts that are identical. And, you know, there's lots of bands over the years that, you know, having just kind of different tonal flavors of, you know, maybe a single coil versus a humbucker, you know, different chord positions. Those things can make a big difference in making your amp simulator kind of fit better within your particular track. Okay. Okay, so a question from Rob. I have imported a stereo wave, and I would like to separate the two channels left and right onto individual tracks. Is that doable? Certainly. So let's say if I wanted to add an audio track here, so I'll make it a stereo track. It's pretty easy to do this in Cubase. So I will just come over here, let's drag just an audio file. That'll be stereo. So I have my left and right channels here. So to do that, I would just select the track, go to your project, and to convert tracks, and we'll say multi-channel to mono. I could keep the source tracks. I could, you know, take the source tracks, we could just say, okay, I wanted to mute them, just the selected tracks, all tracks. So if I wanted to mute, or we could keep the source tracks, delete the source tracks, create them into a new project. I could now hit OK, and that will take those particular files and just automatically split the events into your separate tracks. So you could just now come right there. So it'll be split to your audio left, right. So again, just as soon as you take that, just go to project and to convert tracks and just say multi-channel to mono, and you could do the opposite, which is mono to multi-channel as well. So if you have two mono tracks that you wanted to put to a, directly to a stereo track or to a 5.1 track, you could just kind of do the opposite function. All right, great to see Agent K in a Hangout, who's always kind enough to do some moderation as we need it. Okay, all right, so see question from Sworn. Greg, what software is bundled with UR22? Can one get that software bundle when buying the UR22 secondhand? So generally you get Cubase AI, and you also get, which is kind of a scaled down version of Cubase, and the AI stands for Advanced Integration, and that's what comes with Yamaha products, because there's often some special hooks and tie-ins with Yamaha and Steinberg products. So with that, you get the Cubase AI, the recording package, and you also will get some DSP effects plugins with that. So if you wanted to take a look, you could go under distortion. You'll have what they call the GA Classics. So these are different guitar amps from Yamaha. Also under reverb, we had some discussion on this, I believe, in our last Zoom meetup. You could have the RevX reverbs. And these are very high quality reverbs, and you'll get under dynamics, kind of a morphing channel strip. So this will be kind of an EQ and compressor combination where you could kind of morph to find kind of the optimum kind of sweet spots for different areas. So you get those plugins. Now, if the person has not installed or activated the license of those plugins, they will be available to be passed on if the unit is sold secondhand. Otherwise, if the person has activated that particular license, you could get it on an e-licenser USB key and have them, basically, transfer the license to USB e-licenser if you want it. But if they've already activated it, the only way for them to really get it off is using a USB e-licenser, and that way you could transfer those licenses to your computer and onto your USB e-licenser as well. Okay. All right, great to see Jazz Dude on a Hangout. It's always so helpful keeping up with more real-time aspects of the discussion. And he does the Cubase Nation Discord. So if you want to get a bunch of information on Cubase products, check out the Cubase Nation Discord as well. So we appreciate all your work you do, both to Jan and to Jazz Dude, and to Agent K for his moderation. Okay, so we have a question. Does a pre-fader send include inserts on the channel the send is coming from? So if we have, a pre... the inserts will be kind of just laid out for us. So if we have, let's say on this particular track, and I have my compressor, let's say I'll do some dynamics processing. Let's say we'll just throw a squasher on there as an insert, and we could think of this roughly as the signal flow. So we could have our inserts, let's say our channel strip. So if I wanted to now come over here and run it through an envelope shaper, and then we have our sends. So if I just wanted to have my sends here. So So this, this information will be in the audio. So the inserts, the channel strip, and EQ will be in the channel before it hits the sends. And the send level, whether it's going to be pre-fader or post-fader, could just be determining on, is really more of a factor of, if the gain coming from the fader affects the signal balance kind of going into the effect. So if I wanted to hear the effect without the source track and it was on pre-fader, we could just have that kind of set up, and this won't really have an impact on, of the effect. So regardless, that would, in pre-fader, it's going to basically just have the effect at the same level, and it's not going to be affected. Post-fader would be where it's affected, by the actual amount of gain coming from the particular fader. So, but, if it's pre-fader or post-fader, though, both will have the different sources. It just matters how it's how the fader affects the gain structure of the send. Okay. All right, so we have Greedo checking in from the Netherlands. All right, so I see from Alain from Toronto. So it says, happy to be here, want to know. So he sent me an email. Do you answer here by email? Sent in a few, but didn't hear back. So I think I got some of the emails, but if you want to just ask your question again, we'll be happy to cover that in the live stream today. All right, so we have Rashid from Senegal. All right, and always wonderful to see Jan from Stockholm. Okay. All right, and occasionally, as what just happened to me, my live chat field will jump on me, so I'll apologize in advance for that. All right, so let me find my space in the chat. Okay, so I just see a question. Would you answer in questions in the chat? So, so if you ask in the chat, I'll probably show it in the actual demonstration. I may not answer in the chat itself, but often other people may be able to. All right. All right, so we have Steve checking in from Windsor, Massachusetts. Alex from LA checking in. All right, so we have Filter Freak from Southern UK. And the Truage E-Group from Boston. Great to have you guys on. Okay, so question. I want to add date created and date modified as columns and save that as a default when using load effects chain preset menu. It cancels my additions and goes back to the program by default. All right, so let's say I will come over here. Let's do like an effects chain preset. Okay, so I'll just kind of drop in a couple plugins here. Okay, so now I have this and I have my inserts here and I want to save this as an effects chain. So I will save an effects chain preset. So we'll just go ahead and, all right, so we'll call this Scott. And we'll say March. I'll just say March 16. Okay, so now let's say if I go to my media bay, and I'll just go to my full media bay window. Just close some windows. Okay, so I will just come over here. So let's say we want to go to our effects chain presets. And let's see if it shows up here real quick. We may have to. Okay, so let's just see if we can get it to pop up in our media bay again. So it should be. All right, let me just see if I can get it to show up over here real quick. All right, so here's this. So say, okay, so it says I want to add date created and date modified as columns and save that as the default when using load effects chain preset menu. Cancels my addition, goes back to the. All right, so let's say if I come over here, I do save effects chain preset. So I will just call this, let's say Scott March 16th, 2021. And I could see that kind of in the name. So I don't know if there's a way to all right, so let's say if I want to come over here to Media Bay. All right, so let's say let's get to our effects chain presets. So here I could see the date modified function. And if I wanted to, so let's say a date created function. So let's come over here to our media. I'll just come right over here. Let's just look for date created. Okay, so now when I just come right over here, we'll have our date created. And now anytime that we go to look for different effects chain presets, you should be able to, we'll just get out of this. So you can see that now you have date modified and date created every time that you should just go here. So I'm not sure if Scott, if this will help, but try clicking on the configure defined attributes in the main media bay. And then under media, just make sure that you have, you know, date modified and date created. And then they both should, I think this is what you want to do, but I think at this point they should both kind of show up for whatever you want it to just see here. So let's say your effects chain presets, and let me see if I can just rescan this disk. But now as soon as we come over here, you can see the date created and date modified kind of by default. So let me know if that helps you out, Scott. All right, so we have a question from Alex Morgan. How do you make marker lines show up vertically down the entire project on Cubase 10 Pro? It seems to only show a marker in the top and 11. I noticed it extends down the page. So this was a new function that was introduced in Cubase 11. So if I have marker tracks here, so let's say I have just my marker tracks of like song structure. So if I wanted these marker tracks to kind of be visible throughout the project, we could just, come over here and I'll just move this down. So if I wanted those to be present, we could just click and show marker lines, and then we could just say, from active marker line. And now we could have those marker lines appear throughout the entire project if you want. So again, you could just say, from active marker track or from all marker tracks, and this way they will show up. And I'll go ahead and make this maybe a brighter color so it's a little more obvious as we do this. So we can see kind of the marker lines go through. So this isn't a Cubase, this feature isn't in Cubase 10. It's going to be a Cubase 11 edition. So it's one of the new things. And if I wanted to hide the markers, again, you could right click and just set that to off. And now you don't see the markers throughout the project. Right click on a marker track. And we could say, from the active marker track, and now those lines will be just indicated throughout the entire thing. So if you have version 10, you'd probably need to upgrade to 11 to get that functionality. Okay, so let's see, question. I use Cubase 10.5. I can't add the crossfade. It views by gray color in audio menu. So it could be that, depending on what you have selected. So if I have no event selected and I go to, my menu here, you may not see all of the particular functions that are active until something. So right now it's grayed out. But if I select two events, I could come over here and now the crossfade is available because there's something to be cross-faded. So you may have to just simply, select two events or be in a situation where the crossfade can make a difference. So now if I just hover these two events over each other, the crossfade will become active. So as we, just have our different events overlapping, and I may have to just change one little setting here. Just give me a second. I'll just adjust my delete overlaps. So now as soon as we have events that are overlapping each other, the crossfade will become accessible. So, but if no events are selected, and like what I had was just my preference for delete overlaps, which would delete the events instead of having them over top of each other. So if you have delete overlaps checked in editing right here in the preferences, that may cause that as well. But some functions of the program, like if I'm in all audio, my scores menu doesn't really show up much because there's nothing to really notate per se. All right, great to see Michael Teams on the Hangout from Weatherford, Texas. And he wants everyone to smash the like button. So I will go ahead and concur with that hitting the like button allows us to continue to do these live streams, as well as if you subscribe to the channel. That's always helpful. All right, so you have a question. Hi, Greg. if I have recorded something on an audio track and cut it into a few slices, how can I then bounce them all individually in one go? Is this possible? So there's a couple of different approaches to do this. So let's say if I have this audio file here, and let's say I'll just cut it and say I've done slices. And just make sure. Okay, so if I wanted to do this, this is all one audio file, and I want it to be kind of contiguous. I wanted to write these as separate audio files. Right now, they're basically regions of the longer file. You could select these, go to, there's a couple different ways. One is just doing edit to render in place. And if you go to your render settings, I could just say, okay, I want to do this dry, and we could say as separate events, and I could include different channel settings like processing. So I could just say render, and this will just take, what was parts of one particular audio file. Now it's just rendering them as equal length files and can mute the original, or you could choose to replace them as well. So if I wanted to just select the track here, and I could go over here and just choose to, again, render in place. And if I have the track selected as opposed to an event selected, I could just say, let's remove the source tracks. So at this point, and you could give it like a name. So I could just come right over here. We'll just call this, since Greedo asked a question. And now I'll say render. So we'll see that the name is carried over, and we'll see 01, 02, 03, 4, 5, and the source track will just be gone. And these are all separate and distinct audio files. So again, just come over and do the edit, render in place. And that's probably the quickest way to achieve that particular function. Okay. All right. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. All right. So we see Robbie Bowling from Dallas is going to have to watch the event later. So it's his other half's birthday. Wish her a happy birthday from all of us at the Club Cubase live stream. Robbie, hope you have a great celebration. All right. All right, we see Michael Teams giving kudos to Jan for the Cubase Index site. Well deserved. I see from Jazz Dude that the Discord is a community project. So we appreciate all you do to make that happen now. All right, so we have a question. If I'm copying a short guitar lead from one place on the track to another, how do I control whether it's grabbed from the left or right side of the segment? All right, so let me just come over here. So let's say I have just a short. So, as we grab an event here, so let's say, as I come over here, let me clear my throat really quick. Excuse me. All right. So, so if I'm copying a short guitar lead from one place on a track to another, how do I control whether it's grabbed from the left or right side of the segment? So, if you wanted to just move it, so it's going to just, holding down like your Alt or Option key, you can just, copy it like that. If you go to the right edge to the center. You can make copies, but it's, as we do this, if you grab the beginning at bottom, you'll see that you can kind of truncate the particular files. And if we come over here, just grabbing the event, whether it's kind of at the left or right edge, will just move the event itself, and holding down the Alt or Option key will allow you to just make a copy, but it's not necessarily by the edge. So generally when you're copying something, you could just say, okay, grab the center edge. And if these were different colors, let's say if I wanted to flip like the yellow from the pink, we could switch our grid mode to shuffle. So if you needed to just kind of reverse those, you could just kind of swap the order by dragging one to the beginning, and those two events would flip like that. But just copying it is just usually holding down the left and right mouse button without holding or just holding down the grabbing by the right center edge, or holding down the Alt or Option key as you move the event. But it doesn't really matter if you grab it from the beginning or the end of the event, how it's being handled. All right, great to see Chase on the live stream. It was wonderful to see you on the Zoom meeting this past Saturday. Thanks for joining us. Okay, so we have a question from Elton. I used the Boss RC505 as an audio interface. I'm trying to record vocals on top of a backing track, but when I hit record, the backing track gets recorded on the vocals track as well. Any tips? I'm just going to do a quick look to see if I can figure out. I'm not familiar with that particular interface. It sounds like it's maybe something like a mixer. Just take a quick look. All right, so I see that's a table station, a loop station tabletop looper. So with these, and I get this question a lot with some mixers where it takes like a stereo output. So if it's a looper, a lot of times loopers are designed to take the signal and, record it and have it play over and over again. And then you could, build different loops on top. But it could still be it may not be able to distinguish what's being looped from what's being transmitted out of like a USB connection. And we see this with a lot of USB audio mixers where someone will be recording and, they have, the audio going into two channels of the mixer, and they want to record the voice that's plugged into the microphone, but the mixer itself is taking the two channels from the computer and combining that with the microphone, like for the voice instead of just the voice, because everything is being sent directly out of the same stereo output connection. So you may have to go into the Boss looper and tell it to only if it has a capability to only take the audio output from the microphone input and record that. And sometimes it's like almost like a music minus feature. Some of the mixers that run into this scenario can have tape inputs or have a return channel on a separate fader so that the signal coming back from the computer isn't re-recorded. So you may want to just look in your Boss hardware and see if it's actually re-recording the signal, as the audio is played back to the unit. Some of them aren't smart enough to not, re-record the audio that's already in your program. So it could be just a routing. It could be a routing assignment within the hardware itself. because usually those items, just have a stereo output over USB to transmit the audio, and then it's like, oh, it's an added feature. It's an audio interface, but it's an audio interface that just keeps recording itself over and over again, which is probably not what you want. So it may not be designed to function that way. And it could be just a way to capture the audio from that like looper device to a computer, but it may not be designed as a typical audio interface where, it's not recording just the input, where it's kind of just created a loop. So look to see if there's any functions in the looper pedal, the looper device, to see if you could not return the audio return, or the USB audio coming from the computer is just set out to be re-recorded. So it could be a tricky thing with a lot of mixers that people run into. Okay. All right. So we see from Sub 403, I know we had some discussions over email about Mackie controls. I figured out most of my issues, regarding the Mackie control. Is there a way I can MIDI map Machine Studio's jog wheel to control Cubase 10.5 playhead? I've tried, but the playhead only moves a few ticks. So a lot of this could be set up, it depends on if the encoder itself can, if it's just transmitting one MIDI message or if it's transmitting multiple MIDI messages. So a lot of times what you could do is, let's say if I go to my key commands, and you'll see kind of key commands for shuffle play. So there's different key commands for shuffle play. And I'll get my keyboard going to the correct computer now. That'll help. All right, so I think it's going to be under... Let's say under transport. I think it might be shuttle play. Okay, so you have shuttle play, and you can set these up as various key commands that you want. So as you work with this, if the knob is only transmitting one value, you could kind of have it, transmit, one value. And sometimes it's only transmitting one value, but it's not transmitting a value to play forward and a separate value when you go back to play, backwards. So, but what you could do here is, you could map these. So I think it's Command Shift number 2 and number 4. And I think we could map these in a generic remote. So I'll go to my studio setup, and if we go to like a generic remote, I think that we could go here to transport and device, and let's see if shuttle play is in here. Yeah, so you could now say shuttle forward 2 times. So I will just have this particular note. I'll learn this note. Okay, and let's say I wanted this to go back. Transport. So, if that encoder can transmit multiple MIDI messages, which there's a good chance that it can't, and this is what's needed for like a jog shuttle wheel. So say shuttle backwards 2 times. Okay, so I will do just a quick learn on that value. So as I play back, You know, as we play back, I could just have this, and let me see if I've adjust my control room. So I could just send MIDI messages. So most of them will just kind of, so I could have one MIDI message that can, you know, do multiple things. So if you have, I think it's a contour jog shuttle. It's a little like jog wheel that's often used by video editors. That, you know, as you move the jog wheel, it will do different stages depending on where you move the jog wheel, because that's transmitting, you know, either different keyboard shortcuts or MIDI messages to get to the various levels of the shuttle play. But you could just come here and be able to do that. So there's a chance that, you know, if the encoder itself transmits multiple MIDI messages, instead of just less or more, then you could configure it using the, you know, just set up under transport device, and then you could shuttle play, you know, up to 8 times faster, 2 times faster, or 1/4. So now if I wanted to do half speed, so let's say we'll do this backwards, half speed. So now as I would play back, these two MIDI messages would just do. And so you could set up different MIDI notes just to trigger those particular shuttle modes. So there's a good chance if your machine does that, that's great. And if it doesn't do it, it's a kind of a limitation that device is only spitting out one particular MIDI message, where it may need to spit out, you know, multiple MIDI messages, both playing forward and backwards, because they're all different commands. All right. All right, so we see Lawrence from Rhode Island. It's great to see you on the live stream as well this past Saturday. And we'll do our next live stream at the end of the month. Okay, so we see a question from Jan. How do I deliver a complete stems of my project? A company wants to do a remix, but they do not use Cubase. Can Greg explain tips and ideas, what to think about, metadata, file names, etc.? Thanks. So if we do this, we could kind of keep like the same file names. I'll just do kind of maybe a smaller project here. All right, and so let's say if I have, you know, virtual instruments going on and I've added effects. So let's say I'll just come here and I want to make stems quite easily. Okay, just so we have a MIDI track. So as if I wanted to do this, the easiest way, if someone isn't smart enough to be running Cubase, and you need to give them all the stems so that they don't understand kind of your secrets. So first off is to make sure to see if they want all of your signal processing. Yes or no. So if they do want like all of your effects, your inserts, your EQs, your sends, that's pretty easy to, you know, just ask them what they need first. So, you know, having kind of good communication is always good. So I'll just add a quick effects channel track to the selected. So let's say we now have some different elements for our project. So we would come right over here. Let's do an export audio mixdown. And we could choose to do multiple. We could give it, you know, different names if we wanted to. We could choose what processing. So if you wanted the inserts in the channel strip, if you wanted everything to be disabled and dry, if you wanted to do the groups and sends or the master effects processing. So let's say they just wanted to, do the, everything with no effects processing. So I could choose disabled, and then I could just come over here and I say, okay, I want to select, my effects channels. Those will get rendered, my groove agent, all of my audio tracks. And when it's disabled, my mono tracks will show up as mono, stereo will show up, as stereo. And let's say after export, I wanted to just come here and say, let's, do this and create a new project. So I'm doing just kind of a subset of the project for time's sake. And I'll add this to my job queue. And at this point, we will choose kind of the audio file format. So you can say they want 24-bit 48K, 24-bit 44.1. If you want it to be interlead files for stereo or everything to be split. So I'll just start my queue export. Let me cancel this. Hang on just 1 second. All right, so I did this with MP3. So I'm going to just do this, and I'm going to add this to my queue. So we'll now all have WAV files. We could choose to, add, there's different naming conventions. So if you wanted a counter or just a channel name, we could do that. So I'll just say start queue export. So now it's going to take all those different files, export them, and it will just create a new Cubase project, and all the names, everything has just been created right there. So that's, when we come here, this is our new project with all the names, everything that's just been recorded directly. Or so here we could have a kind of a stereo mix out, my reverb, and all of my individual tracks, and then you could send these to the person. But just, understand, what, check to see what processing, if they have naming conventions. And if they have naming conventions, like you wanted to put your name or the band name so it can't get kind of lost, it's always a good idea in most work situations to make it hard for the other people to mess up. So you could say, the artist name, and you have free text that you could put in. So you say, this is Jan from CubaseIndex.com. And, you could, just simply come over here and give a lot of data in the name so that, no files can get lost. So, but that's kind of the basic principle for doing a quick export, like a batch export for you. Okay. Okay, so I just see, how would I put a series of tracks together as one track, render track, or is there render track, or is there more options? So let's say, if I'm understanding this right, maybe you have audio files that are just maybe aligned kind of like this. So if you have a series of tracks together as one track, so if you wanted to do this and turn those into, one file, there's a few different ways of doing this. So if you are wanting, so let me just come here and say, okay, let's just select these particular tracks. And at this point, I could do a bounce selection. I think this would work in this scenario. All right, so those would keep them, since they're on separate tracks. If I do a render in place, we could just come over here and go to our render settings, and I want to keep these as one event. All right. So, and this would make it all kind of one event. Let's go ahead and choose long files. Sorry about that. And then so that would keep it as kind of, you could have those all as one event. You could also just do an export audio mixdown. So if I wanted to just do my export audio mixdown, and this will be kind of bound by the left and right locators. So let's say if I just wanted to come here and we could do an export audio mixdown, and we could just say create audio track, and I just wanted to do a single export of my stereo out. At this point, I could just add this to the queue, and this would make one stereo audio file of all of the different tracks and import it directly into the project itself. Sorry, I should have just done shorter one. So there's a couple of different ways of doing it. If all the tracks are in the same time and you just want it to mix down, you could just take the left and right locators, and that would take the multiple tracks. So I'm not sure when you say, I believe, if it's going to be in series, if it's going to be just kind of laid out directly like that, then if they're all kind of like multiple tracks at the same time, we could just do a standard audio mixdown. But if it's in series where they're kind of one track following the other, following the other, following the other, and we'll go ahead and just take a look, and we'll let this just get rendered out here quickly. Just give it a second, our minute here. All right, so just seeing while we're waiting for this to render out. So RevX, Yamaha Plate. So those are some of the plugins that come with like the Steinberg audio interfaces. So, and they're obviously highly regarded reverbs directly with the that come with the audio interfaces, and you have those that are on board for DSP, or you could just use them as standard plugins once you have them installed. All right, so we should be done here in just a second. All right, so hit OK. And as we do this, here's our one long audio file that was kind of all of these files in series, just mixed down for us. Okay. Okay, I'm just, my chat field jumped on me. Let me just find my spot. Okay, so I see, Greg, after creating a chord progression in a chord track, how can I have sequencing or patterns to play piano in different rhythms, like ballads, funk, blues, rock, Latin, with intro, verse, chorus, etc.? So, you could have the chord progressions, and, Cubase doesn't necessarily have, like, give me a funk piano part that, you could have your piano parts or any MIDI files that they can automatically follow the chord progressions in a project. But we don't really, we have, some different patterns that you could audition. Like if you go like into loops, and let's say if you go to like SQL library, you can see, I just wanted like maybe acoustic piano, and here you could, just audition. But if you want to do more like bossa nova type rhythms. So say if I want to do Latin pop, and these could automatically, as I adjust the tempo, would be tempo synced. But I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't necessarily, some people would have expectations of thousands of different loops and MIDI parts like this. And there's, lots of companies, and, it's kind of almost a running joke for a lot of people where, there's different MIDI loops that you can get that you could just drag those MIDI loops in. While Cubase will have some, it's not going to be like a repository where you have, 50,000 different MIDI parts. But, any MIDI file that you have, any MIDI event that you do have can automatically just, react, to the chords. But, and there's a number of, I think there might be Tune Track might have easy piano that you could, maybe a tool that's kind of more specific for that. So. All right, so we see from Alan, it says, last week I asked about the direction articulations not showing their colors in the controller lane. Is this a bug? Is Steinberg aware of the issue? So I just had a meeting today and had discussion about that. So we're doing some investigation on it. All right, great to see Glenn from Suffolk, Virginia. All right, and Walter Blackledge from St. Louis. I was able to hang out with the Club Cubase St. Louis guys last night on a Zoom, so that was fun. Okay, so we have, please advise how to load spectral layers file.slp into Cubase. I'm so happy I could drop files into spectral layers. Many thanks. Appreciate all your great info. So I don't think, if we had this spectral layers project here, so let's say if I open this up, and all right. And if I had, different projects here, we could, so let's say if I just wanted to, and now if we save this, so let's say, okay, so I think if that's like the, so we can see that that's just the name of the project. So that's when you use spectral layers kind of by itself, but the intention is to be able to take a particular file here in the integration with Cubase. So I don't think Cubase will open up this spectral layers project, but the integration comes when you go to the audio, and you could just go to extensions, and now from within Cubase, load up that particular file and do the editing within spectral layers. And now we could save those, different functions. And we'll just go ahead and kind of zoom in here. So we could have, all of our editing done in spectral layers within our Cubase environment. But, we still, spectral layers, still people, it makes sense at times to run it in standalone. So that, if you needed to just do a quick repair and you're not in Cubase where it's just running as a dedicated tool. But this way you could use like the ARA2 technology and you could have, spectral layers open within as an extension of your Cubase editing environment. So that's really kind of the intention of the integration with that. All right, so we have Andrew from Devon in UK and John from New Jersey. Thanks for joining the Hangout. All right. So I just see, hi, can someone help me with Cubase 11? Thanks. This is from Berto Marto. So yeah, just let us know what you want to do. There's about 18 million things you could probably do at Cubase, but just let us know what questions you have, and then we'll be happy to answer any of your questions. I just see from Michael Fillingham, does Greg do a Facebook so we can collab ideas? So I am on Facebook, but you could also just email me. It's probably the best way is just to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So once again, clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so we see from Joe, Cubase version 10.5, is there a lot of overlap between Wavelab and Cubase? They both do audio editing, and where Wavelab will do some stuff like, has really extensive batch processing. It's just a dedicated audio editor, so it's not going to be doing MIDI sequencing, notation, virtual instruments. It will have, audio restoration. It will have, pretty extensive spectral editing, kind of like what we're doing with spectral layers. It will say, I need 10,000 audio files in this folder to be this file format, this bit depth, and to be output to this exact loudness. It will allow you to burn CDs, to have more metadata support. So, there will be some overlap, but, we could think of, Cubase as being, if we're to make a recording studio analogy, is Cubase is like, your mixer, your audio, your tape machine, your MIDI instruments, your other instruments, and Wavelab is like your 2-track master, your CD burner, all the metadata for, doing CDs, for delivering multiple formats, to say, okay, I've done my mastering and now I want to export to these 5 different formats all at once, that type of stuff. So, they both will cut audio, they both will process audio, but there's kind of, very separate workflows. And, some people do multi-track editing and mixing in Wavelab? Yes. Do some people do mastering in Cubase? Yes, but they do offer some unique, very specialized tools for those particular things. So they complement each other more than they overlap. All right. So we have lots of people from British Columbia in the Hangout. That's great. It's a beautiful part of the world. Okay, so we have someone checking in from Romania. So question, does Steinberg have an organized location where we users can submit feature suggestions for future versions? So on the if you go to steinberg.net/forums, I believe that there's a feature request area on there. You could also ask any of your feature requests here. Obviously, all of the features that have come in the versions were done by, were requests from users and stuff that, people wanted, that the development team at Steinberg was, wanted to do. And, and sometimes, it's, people think something is very easy, and it could be that it's, going to be covered, that one particular function may be covered in a broader scope of features that, may be coming in the future and is planned. It's pretty amazing that the development team can sometimes tell us, like a year or two in advance, we're going to deliver on this day. And, that they will make that work, and they have that down to a science of, and that's why they're able to deliver so many, wonderful features, and the breadth of the features that they do within a development cycle, from going from like a 10.5 to an 11. So, but they, go to the Steinberg.net forums. You could also just email me, clubcubase@steinberg.de. I was just passing on feature requests, and a couple of suggestions we got from a high profile composer, 15 minutes before we did the hangout, or before we started this live stream with some of my colleagues in Hamburg at Steinberg. So, so you could always ask the questions, send it to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. You could ask here, we monitor these, we document all the questions we get, in these live streams. So feel free to ask anytime here or on the official forums. All right. Wonderful to see Millard Brown on the Hangout. You don't have to worry that you are late. So question, hi Greg, are you aware if Steinberg have a Cubase controller to replace the CC121 in a pipeline? Thinking of buying a CC121, but want to be confident it will be supported in the future Cubase versions. So it's still a current, product. It's being made still. It's been out since 2008, and still working. We recently, even going back previous to that, in 2000, we released a controller called the Houston, and, still to this day, it's supported in Cubase 11. So, Steinberg has a pretty good history of being able to support stuff like that. And so many, older controllers are still supported in Cubase. So I think I haven't heard of any plans to replace it. Some people have a Yamaha Nuage, which is kind of the ultimate controller for Steinberg products. That's obviously a much different price category. But that is, what you could go to if you wanted something really high end. So, but I think the CC121 fits a great workflow and fits on people's desks very easily. And it's a wonderful product. So you'll be very happy once you have it. All right. All right. So is there any way to set up a reset to beginning besides the L button? So let's say if I just come here. So if I go to the L button, we could go to the beginning of, I think, the selected segment. So let's say if I go here, that will just take me to the beginning of the segment. But if I just hit the period key, that will take you to the beginning of the project. So if I'm just hitting like my fast forward, rewind here, my plus and minus on the numeric keypad, just hitting the period key on the numeric keypad, that could take you directly to the beginning of the project. And I think if you have multiple parts selected here, so let's say if these are all on the same track, that you could hit N or B also. So if you wanted to just come here, you could hit, let's say I have this selected, and I could just see if it's on this, but so I could just activate the next part here. And I thought that I could just, let's say if I just hit N or B, that we could go to the next boundary of a part. So I could go to the end of that event, to the beginning, to the end, to the beginning, to the end. Just B and end is another way, or just hit L. That will take you to the beginning of the selected event. So there's a couple different ways to navigate depending what exactly you want to do. Okay, so question from Ali. I've made drums with 4 different samples, lines with Groove Agent, and I just want to make them audio events to 4 different lines for each sample. For example, kick, snare, clap, hi-hat. All right, so let's go ahead and I'll just reset this. Or revert this project. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. All right, just gonna check, see my stream is okay. So it looks okay on my end. Just getting a couple streaming messages here on my end. Just want to make sure everything is going okay. There's a little bit of a delay. Just bear with me. Okay, so it looks like everything's okay from monitoring. Okay. Okay, so let's say we have a Groove Agent kit here. And I will just cut all my samples. And let's say I wanted just one little sample here for my kick. And I wanted a hi-hat. Just clear my throat. All right, so I will now just come over here. Let's say, okay, let's just get a hi-hat. Okay, and I will just kind of start this. Okay, and maybe just like a little snare hit. So I have like these different samples, or let's say even if I come over here and let's say snare. Okay, so I'll just drag my snare to here and let's say hat. Okay, so let's say that's my hi-hat and I wanted just a different kick. So this is my Magic Sauce kit. All right, so let's say I have. Okay, so now if I have a MIDI part that's using those particular notes, so I will just come over here. Let's say we're going to be on C1. Okay. And let's do... Okay, so let's say this is my parts, and I just want to make them audio events to 4 different lines, each sample, for example, kick, snare, hi-hat. So once I have this done, I'm going to just route these to different outputs. So I'll come here and say, we're going to put this to my master out, this snare to output 2, and my hi-hat to output 3. Okay, so now I come over here to my mix console. I could hit these, and we'll see that these are all going out of different outputs. So if I now choose to render in place, since they're being routed to different outputs, I could come over here and say, okay, let's do our channel settings. And I will choose to mute the source events. Okay, so now we could have our drums, kicks, let's say our snares, and our hi-hats all broken down to different channels. So if you just within Groove Agent itself set them to distinct outputs, so master, out 2, out 3, and then do a render in place. And here I chose just to do the channel settings. That will automatically just render them to individual files for you, just that easily. So just see a question from Ali. Do we have a Zoom session today? So we did it on Saturday. So we will do the next Zoom session, the last hangout of the month. I'm not sure if that will be on Tuesday or a Friday, but probably the last hangout of the month. All right, so Sir Robert wants everyone to smash the like button as well. And Jazz Dude says smash the like button like Bonham hit his Ludwig bass drum. That was probably pretty loud, so always sounded great. All right, and we see that Michael is liked and shared on socials. That's great, thank you. All right, so to see comment, wow, must have been 10 plus years since I heard about Cubase. Cool, time flies though, so that's great. All right, it's glad to have you on a hangout. All right, so Ali is saying hello from Iran. Thanks for joining us. All right, and we have people checking in from Denmark. All right, and we have from Razel from Denmark. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. And we have ProWash DFW checking in. So it says, I have PreSonus location or IO station 24C. Do you know how to assign any of its buttons to open edit window in Cubase? So I'll just take a look at this. Let me just switch to the correct computer. Okay, so I just see So it looks like kind of like it's an audio interface, but let me just, or like a single channel device. So if you, so I'm not sure if it's working off of like a Mackie control protocol, but if it is, all you would have to do, and this could be just really, a function of the hardware itself. But if we come over to your studio setup, generally a lot of these devices can work as a Mackie control. So if we go to Mackie control, you have user functions here. So you could say user, and if I wanted to come over here, so let's say edit, and then I think you could just do like an edit track or edit channel settings. So if you wanted this to open up, the channel settings, you could be able to have that just simply, open up your channel view just like that. So, but most of the functions you could just kind of come over here and do edit and edit channel settings if it's a Mackie control. If it's if it is transmitting MIDI information, like when you come over here, it's probably using MIDI as a protocol. You could also just do a generic remote capture, hit a button there, depending on what mode the device is in. If it's just spitting out MIDI notes, you may be able to just set the MIDI input and output here, like you would on the Mackie control. Set that for, and at that point, just have the edit channel settings. So when I hit this particular MIDI note, I could choose to do command. Let's say edit, and then we could choose like edit channel settings, I think right here. So now I could hit apply, and as I hit the particular note, I could just, from my MIDI controller, it will just open and close the channel settings like that. So, but check to see what mode your IO station is in. So, all right. So we just see from Ali. Any of you guys checked out the Apollo from Dom? So that's a new Pad Shop expansion set by Dom Sagalis, who also does a lot of great videos for Steinberg. So. Lots of wonderful presets in there. So if I just wanted to go to Pad Shop, we could add Pad Shop, and I'll just play. I'm not a keyboard player, but I could just come over here. Let's take a look at some of the Apollo. Just do a couple of. And now I could just. So we'll just go through a couple of presets here, and a lot of them will just kind of be able to change based upon, we see MW, like based on the modulation wheel. And Pad Shop is brilliant for, I just wanted to kind of play one sound and let it evolve over time. This is just me holding one note. And, you could almost do a whole soundtrack just based on some of these. So just. So I'll just hold one note down. So always very kind of ethereal sounds, just great for a lot of soundtracks. So. And, you know, Dom's an incredibly talented sound designer and just a wonderful guy. So it's great if you get a chance to support Dom with his product. Okay, so we have a question from Sir N68. If I get a tom drum stereo sample that is balanced more to the right in volume and I want it balanced to the left or completely centered in volume, is it easy to do in some way? So let's say let's see if I have maybe a tom sample here that I could mimic this with. All right, so I'll just take this particular tom and let's say, okay, this is going to be panned. All right. I'll just kind of trim it a little bit here. Right, and make it a little louder here, just to make it obvious. So I will do a render in place. So I'll do the complete signal path. All right, and let me just kill all my solos here. All right. Let me just do this one more time and make sure. All right, so say I'll just take this snare here. All right, so say now I'll listen to the snare here. All right, so let's say I want to just render in place. I'll just export this quickly. Okay, I'll do it again and import it into the project this time. Okay, so now we have our audio file, and let's say it's predominantly on the left or on the right channel. Okay, so let's take the stereo drum samples, bounce more to the right in volume, and I want it balanced to the left or center. So let's go ahead and I will just play just this. So even though that's balanced, I switched it to, let's say I've had my stereo balance panner. You know, if I do that, but if I just switch it to my combined panner, so I'll just come here and have combined panner. So now as we, this way I could, with my combined panner, just kind of place that particular track in the left or in the center or on the right hand side. So switching it to the combined panner, if you wanted to just kind of, so that way we could just, so you know, may default to the balance panner, and as you do that it's only doing the balance. But if we just put it on the stereo track itself, switch to the combined panner, then we could take that source and pan it any way you want. So give that a try, Soren, and I think that will do the trick for you. Okay, so I see from Michael, sometimes when I put a live instrument through my UR22, a double echo sound sometimes. So it could really depend if you have first, you know, depending on the UR22, if you have like a UR22C, some of the units will have DSP. So if you select if it's a UR22C, you could just place it into direct monitoring. So if you have the original or UR22 Mark II, those didn't have onboard DSP, but you could come over here, select the audio interface, go to the control panel and try lowering the buffer size. So once you select the audio interface, click control panel, lower the buffer size. Now, sometimes as you're doing this, if you have effects on the master chain or effects on a track, that may impose the latency. And to kind of temporarily disable those plugins, you could go to the left-hand side of the transport and just click on Constrain Delay Compensation. And if you click on the Constrain Delay Compensation at that point, so it's that will bypass those plugins temporarily while you're working on it, and that should minimize latency as well. So those are some things you could try, Michael. Okay. All right, so we just see from a question from Oreo Reverb, is there a huge difference between 10.5 to 11? So within 10.5, you're going to have, you know, there's a pretty significant difference for a lot of, you know, functions. So within the MIDI key editor, we can now have global tracks. So if you wanted to see markers or chord tracks, tempo tracks, signature tracks, and video tracks, we could see those within our video, within the editor screen. We also have scale assistant. So you can say, I only want to enter in notes that are in D major. And now I could only, you know, snap to be within the scale. So we could do that very easily with the scale assistant. There's been improvements to MIDI CC, drawing data in pitch bend where you could snap to the particular pitch. Some other functions you'll have are going to be some new plugins. So if you wanted to come over here, there's a very extensive metering plugin that comes with it called Supervision. This would allow you to have you know, very extensive metering as you're kind of playing between different sources. So if you wanted to see different aspects of metering, you could do that as well. There's going to be a squasher plugin for doing dynamics. So if you wanted to do like very aggressive dynamics, a lot of people think of it immediately for being more like EDM based. So it's an upward downward compressor with multiple stages of side chains. So you could have multiple side chain inputs within a single plugin. The frequency EQ is also now has dynamic mode. So you could switch between and activate dynamic mode on the frequency EQ, and the imager plugin has also been updated. So when we want to go to the imager plugin, so it's now a multi-band imager plugin. So there's lots of enhancements to the sampler track. So if you wanted to just be able to have, you know, different LFOs, you could come right over here, have, you know, different LFOs, some more filtering options, audio warping, slicing within the sampler track, as well as kind of coming over here to job export queues. So when you go do your audio mix down, I can say, let's take all these tracks, bounce it down as an MP3, bounce it down as a 24-bit 48K stereo wave, bounce it as mono stems, bounce out with stems without processing, with processing. You could set up all these different job queues and have it export kind of all, you know, simultaneously without having to do it one by one by one by one. There's more high DPI scaling options and support for the Metal framework for graphics acceleration on Mac. So more content. So it's a pretty extensive update going from 10.5 to 11. So. Okay, so we see a question from Evil Phil. How do you color the whole fader? I can only color the tag. So depending on your version, this is something that was introduced in version 10.5. So if you go to preferences, and now we go to user interface, we could say go to track and mix console channel colors. So now this is what it looks like in 10 and earlier. We could just have kind of those particular ones, but now in 10.5 and higher. So again, preferences under user interface, track and mix console channel colors. At this point, we could just choose to colorize our mix console channels, and then we could have different levels of color strength as well applied. So now you could have your mix console colored. Okay, see lots of emails coming in. So thanks for all the wonderful questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. Okay. All right, so we see from Riley Richard, is there a refreshed CC121 on the way? So I haven't heard anything announced with that. So your CC121 still a great, relevant, and significant product. So, and if you invest in it, you'll be in, you know, I think everyone that has a CC121 loves it. And it just kind of turns into your right or left hand, depending if you're, you know, I'm right-handed, so my mouse is in my right hand, my computer keyboard's in the middle, my CC121 is my left hand. So. So I just see a question from Michael. Greg, do you have anything new you've made? So unfortunately, I'm, you know, well, I could use Cubase really well, and I've done lots of studio work in the past. I'm not a songwriter per se. So, but some of the other members on the Hangout, Gareth and Pablo and Michael Teams, they've sent me some songs I played bass on. So I should have, you know, And I have another song that I just got yesterday from Gareth, so I'll be adding a bass part probably on it tomorrow. I probably won't have time to get to it today because I have to do the index, but I don't really, I've not done anything new, but I've done, in the past, I've been involved with lots of records. Like I was one of the audio engineers on Eric Clapton's Crossroads Festival way back when. So that was kind of fun, won some awards for that. And, got to record Eric Clapton, which didn't suck, and Eric Johnson and John Mayer, some other people. But I mostly just, dedicated to working, kind of helping people with Steinberg stuff and, hanging out with my family as well. So. Okay. Great to see Grant Nicholas on the Hangout. All right. Great to see Pablo on a Hangout. So saying, I see Pablo saying today started earlier. So yeah, it's in the United States. It switched to daylight saving times over this weekend, and I think it's going to be later in the month. So it's always an interesting time with international conference calls this time of year. So instead of currently I'm on the East Coast in the United States, and usually Germany is 6 hours ahead, but today they're 5 hours ahead for a week or two. So, all right. But we're glad you could join us. Pablo from Galicia, España. Yeah, so I see. So for Michael Finnegan's asking if I play guitar. So I'm just I'm just a bass player. So. All right, so we see new to project templates. Sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Okay, sorry, just let me find my space. I see I have lots of great questions ahead of me. Okay. Okay, so from Robert Gilbert, new to project templates. I saw that some disable all instrument tracks and others they don't. What's generally done? So a lot of composers, when they're kind of working on templates, let's see if I'll just open up a quick kind of composer-esque type feature. So the reason that some people will disable, particular tracks in a template. So, some people will host, VST instruments on different computers. If you have a really large template, you may be working with like Vienna Ensemble Pro, and, you over Ethernet, you could take the audio, send the MIDI information to a computer on a different, you could send this MIDI track out to Vienna Pro, which hosts its own, which hosts plugins, but all the processing power is done on the other computer. Now, some people have migrated as we could have a lot more memory and more multi-core processors. Some people have migrated to the point where they want all of their tracks loaded locally on a particular computer. And when they're not using particular tracks, instead of having those tracks take CPU cycles, they'll just come over here and choose to disable tracks. And when they need to go to their violin, they can just right click over here and say enable track, and now the track is available to play. But if I go to violin 2, now this isn't taking any CPU cycles. It's freed up my memory, but it's not active. So, but again, just one mouse click or one, and now it's So that will be, available. So some people now, I'm seeing there's lots of composers that would just kind of use and farm out multiple machines to have their large orchestral sample libraries kind of always accessible. And some people are choosing the convenience of having everything loaded into one single computer and realizing that, okay, maybe I'm using 50 out of 3,000 tracks. So why do I need, all these tracks sitting here occupying memory, taking away my CPU cycles, and will just kind of load and unload. So it could really depend, Robert, on the size of your template, how much RAM you have, how much processing power you have in your computer. So both approaches are right, and neither of them are wrong. It could really, if you're the guy who needs 3,000 tracks playing back at once, then you probably will have stuff being shared across different different computers. But if you need access to 3,000 sounds, but maybe you only play 60 or 100 at once, then you could choose to disable tracks. All right. All right, just reading through different comments. All right, so we see Faceless Productions saying hi to everyone. All right. You see that Pablo probably missed our Zoom get together on Saturday because he was working on drum parts that I'm going to be playing bass parts to. So we'll excuse you this time, Pablo. So. All right, so we see some more people coming in late with the time change. Even Kyle, who I believe is an American, so, I always remember in college this time of year when there's a time zone change, and one of my classmates made it to Tuesday and showed up to class an hour late with a really confused look on his face. And everyone just kind of burst out laughing. So. Okay, Greg, how did you set your transport control? I know it's my third question today, and we are many, so it's no problem. So my transport control, if you don't, sometimes this is kind of abbreviated to get more functionality into transport. So if you see these three little dots, this often means that you could see additional data. So a lot of times the default, because there could be more information that can fit on most computers, kind of horizontally. So if I wanted to just, come over here, you could extend to have, rewind, fast forward, add it just by changing the size. So those are some of the little tricks that you could do to kind of, change the size and what's visible within your transport to customize it for yourself. Okay, so we see from Faceless Productions, thank you for your wonderful videos and sessions. I'm glad they're helpful. So just see from Michael, says, but Nuendo uses spectral layers internally, I heard. So Nuendo and Cubase Pro will both ship with spectral layers 1. So it's not part, of Cubase. It's included with your Cubase license so that you could have access to it, but Cubase and Nuendo will kind of access spectral layers in the same way through ARA2. So there's no real difference there. Okay, so hi Greg. Question: can ChordPad play SQL MIDI file in play mode patterns? Thanks. I haven't worked with sequel play mode in a long time, but any of the sequel content that you have, you could drop in. So if I wanted to take, let's say a finger bass part, let's say an electric piano part here. This is just some of the content. Let's stay. Okay, so I'll have this string part. Okay, so let's say I just have, and I wanted to look at okay, so now if we wanted to, we could come over here. Let's say for this particular part, I wanted to add a chord track. So I will come here. Right, I'm just gonna okay, so let's say I'll just copy this a couple of times here. And I'll glue these all together. Okay, let me just... Okay, so now if I wanted to just have this particular track follow the chords, so we can say follow the chords here. And as I change this chord, let's say I want it to be an A flat, I want the next chord to be E flat. So you can see that these parts will automatically change to match whatever chords that you type in. But I could dig up SQL, and I'm not sure if I have it installed on this computer for SQL 3. If you send me an email if that's not what you want it to be covered with the play mode patterns. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a very speed mode like Logic Pro in Cubase? So, you know, some companies have kind of different terminology for very speed. But let's say if I wanted to come here, so very speed is often, you know, kind of speeding down or, you know, changing the speed of tape playback. So that you could, you know, change the pitch and the length of the audio at the same time. So let's say if I'm here, we could place all of the tracks into special, like all of our audio tracks into special modes here. So let's say I'll switch all of these to tape algorithm. So as I would change the tempo here, you'll hear the speed slow down and the pitch slow down, just like it's analog tape. So let's say I want to go 104, 112. So right back to your original pitch. So that's how you can do vary speed. So, but I'm not sure if that's the same terminology that is used in other programs. All right, so I just see from tutorialism, hi Greg, when programming beats using the editor inside Groove Agent, how do you set up the grid and quantize to display groove percentages like you do in a regular MIDI editor? So let's go ahead and take a look. I'm not sure if it's done there, or it might have to be within the regular MIDI editor, but we'll see if there's a little, see if I could figure it out. I haven't tried it in there, so let's add the full version of Groove Agent. Okay, so now we'll go to our pattern. In the full version of Groove Agent, you could actually come over here and just see the particular patterns of, you know, and you could program patterns directly inside of here. So I think this might be just all right, so I can see that we could have the groove, we could have the interactive quantize setting there. Just see where there's a setting. So I don't see where we could do even the percentages, just that there is kind of an IQ, and I'm not sure if that's taking it from Cubase. I would think that it's not. All right, so we could put in our, let me just see if it's a modifier key, maybe. See if it's, yes, I don't see where to, you know, it may be, I'm not sure where to, let's see if it's, I don't think it's going to be under options. Yeah, I would think it would be here, but I'm not seeing where we could even set kind of the strength quantization for the, I could do some more research if you want to send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, but I don't really see I see where you could do it. Obviously you could do it in the MIDI part, but you think that if you could enable the iterative quantize, that you should be able to have that adjustable. But I'll see if it comes to me later. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I could check it out. All right, so we have Kai checking in from Florida. All right, so I just see, sorry if this question's already been covered, but how soon do you think Cubase will be available for the Apple Silicon, the M1 chip? How much compatibility with Rosetta is already available? So there's a lot of people running Rosetta stuff currently with the 11.0.1. I think maybe the next maintenance release will see more Rosetta compatibility coming with that. I know it's in testing as we speak, but we'll see that. And there's still lots of different aspects of investigation going on to, get more stuff working with, the M1 processors to be native for it. It's quite a big undertaking because there's lots of stuff that just, audio interfaces, third-party plugins that just won't work with it. So there's some things to some things to be aware of. So, all right. So we have people checking in from Athens. Welcome to the Hangout. All right. All right. John Costigan says, please press the thumbs up button like Caesar favoring a gladiator. And also you could do that, but if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Just going to make sure everything's looking okay. I'm just getting some different streaming messages from my YouTube. So just want to make sure everything's okay on the other end. Everything looks okay. So just see my Logic keyboard with the Cubase Nuendo template to help me remember my key commands is limited brain space, pricey, but the feel is also nice. So that's good. Yeah. So sometimes, having a particular keyboard with all the default keyboard shortcuts is helpful. Okay, so we have a question. I have multiple hard drives on my PC. Does it help to have Cubase on the C drive, library on another, and all VSTs on another? So, generally how I see some people break it apart, if you're working with lots of really, high intense video, some people I see have a dedicated video drive, a dedicated drive for samples, one for audio and one for your audio, your audio files. So you have one for your operating system, one for instruments, one for audio. That's generally a pretty good place to be. But a lot of people, and depending on how many instruments, if you're streaming 3,000 orchestral tracks in your template, having a dedicated drive for that apart from your audio could be helpful. All right. Just having lots of emails come in. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay. All right, so just see a comment from John Costigan. Thank you, Greg. I think the Groove Agent output channels question just fixed my battery 4 problem. So, Okay, so just see question, IK Multimedia Arc 3 in Cubase control room, best location. So I think that's going to be probably the best location for it. So as we want to come over here, a lot of times, we have the ability, people I see, and these are kind of, a lot of these plugins are set up to do kind of room correction. And it's fixing a deficiency in your room that you may not want applied to a particular to the mix. So sometimes people will put it on their master fader, and these plugins can kind of apply EQ and different filters and treatments to basically make up for deficiencies in your particular room. Now, as you're working with that, you sometimes what happens, people put it on the master fader and they export a mix through it, and then all the EQ changes that have been applied, to correct your room, not what's necessarily that you want embedded in your exported audio file, that will be included. So at that point, I would choose to do a lot of my room correction plugins as an insert on the control room. And that way, when you render your file, it's not going to incorporate the plugins in your control room. These are just for playback and monitoring. So that's the best place to have kind of like a room correction plugin, maybe something like a Sonar Works or the IK Multimedia Arc 3. Okay, so question, will the dongle removal work with older versions of Cubase? So it's still very early in that process, but, Steinberg just wanted to start the communication process with the customers that they will be migrating away from a physical USB-E licenser. I don't have many more details than what I've read in the same public statements that have been available. So I'm not sure if it's going to be for future versions or for legacy versions. So that hasn't been announced yet. So, and I don't have an inclination either way. Okay, so we see from Suren68, Soren, my Zoom R24 gives me 8 fader controls at the same time plus master fader. One feature request would be that the 8 faders should be numbered 1 through 8 so I can easily see which fader to move. So, generally, if you have 8 faders, so one feature request would be that the 8 faders would be numbered 1 through 8 so I can easily see what fader to move. So this could be a limitation, so most control surfaces will allow you to kind of, and you'll see like if you have the 8 controls, and we often get this question, if you have a control surface, you may notice that there's a little white outline indicated. I think even in the mix console or in like the channel view. So if you have like an 8-channel control surface, which sounds like your Zoom R8, you would see this little outline kind of indicating for the select what channels are being actively controlled by that control surface. Now, many control surfaces you could increment by a single channel or increment by, banks of 8. So you can go 1 through 8 or 2 through 9, 3 through 10, or 1 through 8, 9 through 16, 17 through 24, depending on if you increment by a single fader or increment by a bank. So some of those functions could be, determined by the actual control surface. So see if your Zoom has, like next channel or bank settings. All right. So just seeing some more emails come in. All right. So, I'm not sure if it would, be numbered 1 through 8 and sort of where you want the numbers to be 1 through 8, but just look for the little outline So it may not, change the name, but just look for the little outline, and that will give you kind of a visual indication of which controls are actually being controlled by the particular control surface in its current state. Okay, so I just see a question. Can the tracks on the Zoom, let's see, the R16 interface? Okay, sorry, just got a text message. So can the tracks on the Zoom R16 interface units be transferred to Cubase tracks? So if it is, I'm just going to do a quick look and make sure it's what I think it is before I kind of waste a bunch of time answering questions. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so it looks like it's a kind of a portable recorder as well. So generally, those those files, you could probably take it off of like an SD card or like the little memory card in the Zoom and pop it into Cubase, and then you could import all the files. And let's say if your files are all kind of just moved around, and what you could do is select all of the audio files in the project. So I'll come here, just do like a select all, and then you could just come back here and go from edit, and you'll see move to and then origin, and that would place the audio files at their timestamp position. And then, probably it's going to be a broadcast WAV file, and there's like a little, this file starts at this moment in time, and that way all the files should be able to line up pretty easily. Okay, so just see, what is the best way to sync to a beat on acapella recording so that the shifts in tempo has breath pauses? It's from a church service. All right, so it's going to be kind of the same process. Let me see. I don't think I have. I have on my studio computer. Let me see if I have maybe an audio file that might work for this. Let me just try one here. So, you could just do a tempo detection. Let me see if I could kind of recreate something here. All right, so we'll show a little bit of spectral layers in action here. So let's say I have a stereo track. So if I wanted to come and let's go to my audio menu and let's go to spectral layers. And I will just choose, this is the full version, but I could unmix stems. So let's say I just wanted to unmix the vocals from this project. This is almost like taking the eggs out of a baked cake part. So now I'll do this, and I'm just going to drag the vocal into project. Okay, so let's say we're just going to have so what you could do is just come over here and just do a tempo detection, and this could be really dependent upon different material here. So all right, so if I wanted to come here, let's say that if you feel the urge to see me, well, you best pretend you're blind. I don't mean to be unkind, but all the reasons I left you behind, I just have to remember I don't care about you anyway. So, and once you do your tempo detection, this could probably, depending on the file, you may have to just kind of come back here and say, this is where the downbeat is, and just do little tweaks here with an acapella, but that will generate the tempo track for you. And then you could just take any audio file and, let's say I just want to take, let's do something horribly inappropriate. So I'll just drop that in, and I'll put that into musical mode. And now we can. And once this is in musical mode, it will follow the tempo. So you could try the tempo detection, but a cappella, depending on the material. Some acapella material is, designed to have a beat and not have a lot of pauses because there's no other instruments. So just kind of how the music can be composed. But you could just kind of, use, once you do the tempo detection, it will take you into the time warp tool. So you could do tweaking if necessary. And then at that point, just kind of tweak it. And then your other instruments can kind of fall in line and follow the tempo that's been extracted from the audio recording itself. Okay, so see a question. Will Cubase be dongle free from April? Is there truth to that rumor? So I would say no. So I wouldn't expect that. So I just see a question from Concert Replay. Are there plans for Wavelab to receive Avid control surface compatibility like Cubase has? So I haven't heard of any plans for implementing Yukon. So Yukon was actually originally developed by Euphonics and Steinberg. So, but a lot of it is dealing more with kind of plug-in control. So I haven't heard of any plans I could see for, but it's not. Most Yukon control surfaces are dealing with, more multi-track mixing, and that's generally not something you do inside of Wavelab, but you could use it for transport and other functions. But the Yukon protocol doesn't do MIDI. So, you could do kind of a generic MIDI functions for control inside of Wavelab, but I haven't heard of any plans for Yukon support, in Wavelab, but I could definitely kind of pass that on. But, you can use the CC121 inside of Wavelab as is. All right, so I see how to connect Cubase to OBS. So, what I'm doing in my Cubase setup here is I'm actually just running, I know there's software solutions. I know some people, I think Reaper has a plugin, maybe Restream, that's freely available. I know some people also on Windows will use Voicemeeter. Some people on Mac will use a program called Loopback, and that could, send the audio out. So what I do is I just, for all of my live streams and to get kind of high quality audio is I take my output of Cubase. It has its own audio interface, a UR24C. And then I feed that, I feed the analog output of that into a separate USB mixer where my microphone is connected to. And I use the mixer, which has a USB output, and I use that for OBS and for all the streaming. And I use my audio interface for Cubase, and it just, works, remarkably well, having kind of two different data streams. So. Okay. Okay, so just see from Cal Richards, I've started using a lot of the stock plugins in Cubase since watching Dom Sigalis's videos. I hadn't realized how amazing a lot of they are in the latest versions. So, the stock plugins aren't, there's a lot of companies that could be guilty of, having, we'll call it batteries included, plugins as a part of their DAW, but we invented VST Steinberg as a company, so we can do more with it. We can been doing it longer than anyone else, so there's a lot of fantastic resources, and instead of trying to realize revenue that way, we choose to include the powerful processing options in Cubase to make your Cubase experience better. Because, I often call it, and people on the live streams have heard me call it, versionitis, where a lot of times, your main DAW could get updated, but, different plugins may not be with an operating system, or, your hardware doesn't work, this doesn't work, this, rewire wasn't 64-bit for a long time. So there's lots of components when you're using third-party solutions that can be a big variable when there's a change in operating systems, which there are all the time. And as technologies move on, so, having everything kind of included within your environment makes a lot more sense within a single cohesive environment. And, it's just a natural evolution. Like, most people don't buy a separate camera, video camera, GPS, organizer, phone, they just buy your cell phone, and that way you could, have everything kind of working better together. So, but it's great that you're figured out that, we're having more capabilities, with the included plugins. So. All right, just reading through some more comments. Okay, so again, all right, so we're seeing kind of same question asked a couple times. Okay, so I see a question. Have not checked in some time. Does my Steinberg Houston work in Cubase 11 Pro? So it was initially kind of removed from the 11.0.0 version, so the initial release, and then I had mentioned that they should, bring it back, and they did with the 11.0.1. So yeah, even the control surface that's been, discontinued for nearly 20 years is still functional in the latest versions of Cubase. So. All right, so we see from Mr. Classics, just saying as a whole YouTube channel with tutorial videos on Cubase 10.5. He's going to bump up to Cubase 11. That's great. All right, good to see Gareth on the Hangout. Is he thank you for the kind words about the bass parts, Pablo. It's always great to play with a wonderful drummer as well. Makes my job easier. All right. So my chat field just jumped on me. Let me just scroll back. All right, just finding my place. Thanks for all the wonderful questions and discussion. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. All right, so I think I found my spot. So Gareth discovered daylight saving time in the US, but not in Europe yet. So sorry about that. All right, wonderful to see Sable Winters on the Hangout. Sorry, and we know it's a little early for West Coast to US. So. Okay, just reading through comments. Lots of great stuff. Okay, so I just see, hey, Greg and group, I'm working on a tune right now, and I would like to be able to bounce mono and stereo from Groove Agent at one time. So I think we could show you how to do this, Grant. So I'll do a new project here. Okay, so let's just load up. So let's say I wanted to do mono, kick, snare, hi-hat, and stereo, overheads, and rooms. Okay, so I will come over here. So let's say we have our pattern. So I will, all right, so let's say I wanted to come over here. I'm going to add some group channels. So I wanted 2 stereo groups. And I wanted 3 mono groups. Okay, and I'm going to come over here. Let's say I wanted my kick to go out of output 1. So let's say snare. I'm going to send it to output 2. And let's say hi-hat. We'll send to output 3. And let's say output 4 for room. And output 5 for hi-hats. So now that I have these, what I want to do is to take, let's say, my kick. I'll select it here. So I see, and I'm going to just send this instead of to Groove Agent. Let's say it's output here. So I will take this to group 3. And let's take my snare. Say group 4. Let's do. So let's say hi-hat out of group 5. And let's say overheads. We'll put this into stereo group 1. And let's say our room into stereo group 3. So now that I kind of have that routing done, if I wanted to, let's say if I'll just come to this groove agent part and I will take this pattern and drag and drop it on. All right, so let's see if I just do a render in place now. So I'll just go to edit, to render settings, and I'll just do, let's do our complete signal path and render. Okay, so it seems like that put, let me just go ahead and create 3 mono inputs. And 2 stereo tracks. I know this could be, once you have this kind of set up once, you could save it as a preset. And I'll say this input is coming from group 3, group 4, group 5, group 1, and group 2. And we could label these kick, snare, hat, overhead, room. So let's select all of these tracks. And now as I play, so it should, let me just take this off here. All right, so let's say we have our outs, and our outs are feeding groups here. So let's just play the groove agent. Okay, so see if I arm those tracks and then just hit record. For some reason it doesn't want to record, but that's kind of how you could set that up to just record. So usually that should be passing. Just check my but that's generally how you could do it, is just by routing it to groups, to mono and stereo groups, and then I'll just check my instrument one more time, just make sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I have this set to But if you do that, and I do have a video on this, but you could kind of just route it. I'm not sure. I'm probably just having a brain cramp moment now, but why it's not passing the audio. But if you send it to an output or to a group, and then you should be able to just be able to record both audio and in mono and stereo simultaneously. And if you want Grant, just send me a quick email, or I could send you an email after the stream and let you know where the link is so you could copy that settings. Okay. Okay, so just see best place in control room for room correction. So if you want to know where the best place is in a control room for like a room correction plugin, so we'll come over here to our, and this could seem a little counterintuitive at first, but if we click on main tab here, that will kind of expose some functions at the bottom, and then click on inserts. And this is where I would put the room correction plugin. I would just put it here because regardless of if you're switching between different speakers, you could just come right over here and switch between your different speakers, and these plugins would work through all of those. If you put them on the main, let's say the monitors, you could put inserts here, but if you switch between monitors, you'd have to have a separate instance of that insert for each monitor. But so click on the main and then click on inserts once you have the main exposed, and then you could have up to 8 plugins right there. Okay, so just see, how can I use one MIDI track to trigger different instruments in different octaves? So if you wanted to do this, this could really kind of be dependent upon the actual instrument itself. So if I wanted to come to, let's say if I have an instance of like Hallian Sonic is good for this, or Hallian Sonic SE that comes with Cubase. So if I wanted to create a layer, I'll just come over here. Okay, let me just do new project here. All right, so say if I wanted to do just a quick layer, I could say I want it, let's say horns. So as I will come over here, let's set this to. You know, so once I go to MIDI here, I could just say, okay, I wanted to layer the horns, let's say with, do maybe a woodwind, let's say bassoon, and this will be on MIDI channel 2. But what you could do is just kind of come over here, put these on the same MIDI channel. And let's say I could now just come right over here and you have transpose, and you could just say, okay, And let's say I wanted to put in an organ, like an organ here, or let's say a choir. So I could just come here, let's say to Olympus Elements. We have this on channel 3. And if I wanted this to be an octave higher, so I will just come here to MIDI and say, let's make this channel 1. So at this point, let's make this 2 octaves. And it's all from the same one note message. Now, if we have notes, if you have these on different tracks already on different instruments, you could always so if I have just some MIDI notes there, we could also use the logical editor for these types of functions. So let's say I wanted to copy, we'll say MIDI notes, and I want to take value 1 and let's add 12. So when I do this, I could just say apply. And what it's done, I hit it twice, is we'll look at these two, and it will just take these 2 different parts here, and we'll look at both of these in the editor, and they'll be just an octave apart. So that's another way you could kind of do it with the logical editor, where you could just kind of double, take this, copy it to a different track and then assign that to a different instrument, and that will be an octave higher without having to do it in real time. You can kind of do it after the fact as well. Now, sometimes one other method, if you wanted to do this, if you start with a MIDI track, you could have MIDI sends. So at this point, I could say I wanted to take this, I wanted this to go out to that instrument, and I wanted to do MIDI modifiers. And we could say I just want to transpose this track up 12. So I could play one note on this track, and to these other instruments, I could have those transposed independently as well. But it doesn't, you don't have MIDI sends on an instrument track, just a MIDI track. But the MIDI track could be routed to a virtual instrument. Okay, so just see what's the best rack option in your consideration. So I'm not sure if it's a physical rack or a software rack. It's from Michael. So if you could let us know, maybe if you clarify. Okay. Right, just reading through comments. So I see, so where did the name Cubase originally come from? Was it an acronym, a German word? So, someone asked this question, I think a hangout or two ago. So the story I had heard, and someone else confirmed it in one of the comments on the live stream, was they were going to be after Pro 24 on the Atari. They kind of came up with a whole new architecture, and some of the developers that were doing that, I believe, is Charlie Steinberg, Werner Kracht, probably Wolfgang Kundras, Stefan Scheffler. And some of those, 3 of those guys are still, doing stuff with Steinberg to this day. They came up with the whole kind of concept of the, project window where you could see stuff coming in and going out, which most companies have gravitated to this paradigm. And they really haven't had to change kind of the core basic functionality of that. But it was originally from Pro 24, which was not as graphic. They wanted to just kind of take this, and the original naming was going to be called Qubit, I believe. And I think it was just a made up word. Sometimes coming up with names and getting those to be trademarked and stuff like that could be tricky. So they're coming up with Qubit, and I believe that was being used in a video game. So at the last minute, right before release, they changed it to Cubase. So that, at least that's what Manfred Röhrup, who founded the company with Charlie Steinberg, told me last time I was in Germany and we had lunch together. So yeah, I got to get all sorts of great stories about the early days from Manfred, and he's just a wonderful man. I have so much respect for Manfred. All right. All right, so a question from Dallas LaRue. Is Hallian Sonic 6 included with Cubase Pro 11? If not, how can I get it? So there's it's kind of, it could be confusing with the names because there's Hallian and Hallian Sonic. So Hallian 6 is the sampler where you can make your own sounds and create your own instruments and have all forms of synthesis. And then there's Hallian Sonic 3 and Hallian Sonic SE3. So Hallian Sonic SE and Hallian Sonic 3. So Hallian Sonic 3 is sold separately as its own instrument. All the features in Hallian Sonic are available in Hallian 6. So I believe when you get a Hallian 6 that you actually have the Hallian Sonic 3 license. So those are available as their own instruments that you could purchase, or they also become available as part of a collection of instruments called the Absolute 4 VST Connection, Absolute 4. And that's a collection of different instruments like the Hallian Symphonic Orchestra, the Grand, the Full Groove Agent, different instruments, Retrolog, as well as, Hallian 6. So you could always purchase that separately. And if I were to give you a 1-sentence, description of the differences between those, you could say that Hallian Sonic would have all the sounds for playback organized, and Hallian 6 is really designed to allow one to create their own instruments. So if you wanted to sample yourself and do all the sampling and make your own instruments, Hallian is the perfect solution for that. And that's version 6, and Hallian Sonic is, I just want to have access to a whole bunch of different sounds at my disposal, so I could go through, 4,000 bass presets for synth bass, stuff like that. All right, so we see Ian Rushmore's joined the hangout. Great to see you. Okay. All right, just reading through more comments. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. It's a good check, see how it's going. Keep getting weird messages on my stream end, but it looks okay. On my monitoring computer. All right. All right, so I just see, is there a way to use manual time warp on a folder containing all my drums? Pro Tools has that edit capacity since years ago. I don't think Cubase can do that, which is kind of bad. So it's, the development team is very aware of that. So I think that, there's probably, I'm sure there's people that are working on bringing that as a solution as we speak. We could do kind of a lot of different warp quantizing, using kind of more like kind of what a lot of people call like a beat detective style editing for quantizing drums, but doing a multi-track warp isn't available yet. So, but I know that the developers are very aware of that issue. And I was, we're just discussing it today in a meeting with them right before our live stream. Okay, so I just see from Ian Rushmore, on my old SX2 system, there was a little drum box called LM7. Is it still available? Has it been incorporated into Groove Agent? And if so, where can I find it, please? So all the samples are built into Groove Agent. And I think once you go to Groove Agent here, that that was a subset of sounds in LM4 at the time. So say if I just wanted to load kit, I believe you would see all of those in the Groove Agent 1 kits. So all of those kits would be available here. So the naming conventions would still be the same, but just look in the Groove Agent 1 kit, and those are all the samples from the legacy LM7 and the Groove Agent 1. All right, so we have Greg Malik checking in from Hawaii, saying aloha to everyone. Now you're just making us all feel bad that I think haven't gotten a chance to go to Hawaii in a while, but I've had some friends that have moved there recently, kind of during pandemic and working remotely and having a good time. Okay. All right, good to see Fred Robinson on a Hangout. It's a great comment from Gareth. Groove Agent certainly does a lot more than me, so. All right, so we have Fred who's checking in from Prague. Thanks for joining us. All right. So I just see a question. Can you use two CC121s? Would there even be a purpose? So I think that they would basically just, mimic each other. I know someone who did it just so that they could have two AI knobs, and the AI knob is just like a knob that you could hover over a parameter. So any parameter that you have in the kit. So say if I just wanted to come here to Groove Agent, I could hover over, I hover with my mouse and I move the knob and it just automatically controls that parameter. So, and you could lock that so that I could maybe adjust this parameter with my mouse and still control this with my encoder. So I know someone had just bought a second one so they could keep one of the AI knobs locked to a particular function. And so, but otherwise it's going to be, almost entirely duplicative. All right, so just see, why is Greg using 10.5.2? So my project may say 10.5.2, but I can assure you I'm running the latest Cubase Pro, the same build that everyone else has. So. Okay, so from Fred Robinson, Greg, can you walk through how to use the tempo detect feature? I used it on a variable speed 3/4 piano audio part, but wasn't sure how to use the buttons after the detection stage. All right. So let me just find, I think I have a project that we could use for this. Okay, so let's say I have a file here. And as we listen to it, the metronome is not aligned to the audio file. They're completely independent. So this was recorded without a click. So if I want instead of making the musicians uncomfortable and recording to the click, if they're playing well and everything feels great, who cares what the tempo is? But we may want to have the tempo configured so that we could edit on the grid. So if I wanted to take this, I'll go to my project menu and say tempo detection. So let's say I'll just come, and then I'm going to say analyze. So right now we have our tempo detection done, and we get this little window with some other little functions. So as I want to work on this, I can see right now there's an offbeat correction. So right now it's kind of on the upbeat. So I could just kind of flip that. And let's say, okay, maybe it, I wanted to multiply the tempo by 2. So if it kind of detected the wrong pulse, or let's say divide by 2. And then you have 4/3 or 3/4. So this is if it's like maybe in 12/8, you could use those particular functions. And that's, those are kind of what those different options are for. And if you're in 3/4, so let's say I close this out, Cubase it's kind of figuring out where the beat is. So it'll add the tempo track as well as the signature track. So here I may want to just define where the downbeat is. So I'll say here's our 4/4, and so we'll have pickup notes. And now we could have that grid automatically created based upon the performance. And if I wanted to, just drop an audio file and place that into musical mode, I could come here, just let's do something right. It's just horribly inappropriate. And now that I could just come here, place that into musical mode, and now we have, now this track is speeding up and slowing down to automatically follow the tempo. And if I take this track out of musical mode, it's not going to play in time. It's playing its original time, but it just, and now you could be a remix genius in a matter of minutes and not tell anyone how easy it was to do that. All right. Okay. All right, so lots of great discussion. All right, and Michael Team wants everyone to whack the like button. All right, Pablo is just bragging he's going to get a cup of coffee, so he's probably already had 2 cups by now. So, but that sounds good. I may need a mocha before I start the index tonight. All right, so we see Gareth is using Groove Agent now. Now Pablo's concerned that Gareth is replacing his drum performance. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. All right, sorry, just find my spot. Okay, so I think we're okay. All right, so just a question: how can I record my internet browser audio without connecting my sound card with an interface with a cable? So, depending on it, it could be slightly different on Mac or PC, but, some people, I think, can set up like little kind of loopback plugins to do that as well. Some audio interfaces will allow you to do that as well, to have a loopback function. But sometimes by the time you spend 8 hours, figuring it out, you could just hook up a cable. That always works well. Or just extract the, an audio file from like a YouTube. There's different utilities for that. All right, so it's just a question from Florent. Hey, you probably have some experience on both platforms. Would you rather recommend to run Cubase on Windows or Mac, stability, etc.? So, Cubase runs great on either platform. I go back, so like I'm using I kind of do things probably the opposite of most people. My studio, I do everything on Windows, and I would probably say I'm more of a Windows person. I have a Mac for work that they give me because I could do, on the Intel systems, I could do, both Mac and PC on one computer. So that's, advantageous to me for work stuff. But I think both operating systems are great, and they both suck and are terrible in their own ways. They're very close. I think a lot of people, there's been a lot more kind of harder transitions in technology, I think, on the Mac OS platform, not only with operating systems, where, a lot of plugins will have to, if you have a lot of third-party components that will have to constantly be updated, and you may be kind of, you don't have the choice to replace or upgrade certain components in your hardware. That's a lot of people find, to be a disadvantage. And we see that the Windows platform kind of has been very stable. Both main processors don't have any issues. So, but we're going through not only an operating system change, but a processor generational change on Mac. And it's, hasn't been the most, smooth. It hasn't been incredibly smooth for a lot of people and a lot of functions. Maybe in the future it'll be, promising, but, it may not offer such huge, compelling things. But, either platform works really well. Just, be sensible with, how you use your computer, and, and you'll be in good shape. But I know a lot of people like the, ability to, customize things a bit more. And if you really wanted to push the envelope, some of my composer friends, who have, unlimited budgets, will do everything on, really beefed up PCs that they could customize and change over time. Like, there's, a new technology that's out now. We could incorporate that in a PC without having to buy a whole new PC. So, all right. All right. All right. So we have, Leif checking in from LL Studio, Norway. Welcome to the Hangout. All right. Okay, so we have a question. What is the proper way to save a patch in the Halion Sonic SE if I'm going into a different studio? I believe that it might even be saved within your profile manager. So if you just go to your profile manager, I believe that this will be incorporated in there. But if not, you could just, like when you go to your studio setup, you could just come over here. So if you want to go to your media bay, so let's say I created a new patch and I'll just do a new instrument track for Halion Sonic SE. All right, let me just find like a synth kind of. All right, so let's say I'll just come here. All right, so let's say I'll save this as a patch. So I'll go to my preset management. Let's just save preset and we'll call it Doug Michael. All right, so now I think if I would just come here to my media bay, we could go to user content. So let's come over here. So let's. All right, so I think even if we now wanted to just come to, let's say our media here, let's go home, user presets, do VST instruments. And now at this point, you could just, right click on the preset and just reveal in Finder. And then you could just copy that to like a flash drive and be able to move that anywhere that you want as well. So just, look for it under. So I'll go home. So go to user presets. You can say VST instruments, right click, reveal in Finder or Explorer, and then you just will have that right there. Okay, so I just see a question. When will we be able to go without the dongle, and how are they doing that? So they haven't, they haven't shared a lot of public information. So, there are obviously, there's lots of details to make, because we have some people that don't want the dongle to still have access to the license management system, and some people really prefer the e-licenser and having a physical e-license, especially if you migrate to different computers and systems, and you work in different studios. So they haven't announced it. I think that as developments come, and this is probably, months off, but, they've had a couple of times where, parts of the server that handles the license management have had some maintenance issues. They just had it a couple weeks ago, and there's a lot of people that were understandably upset about that you purchase something and you can't activate the license. And then it takes a couple days for the whole system to kind of get reset. And it's a big imposition on customers. And that's why they kind of made an early announcement. This plan has been in design for a while, and I think that they understand different schools of thought and different use scenarios, and they're want to make sure that everyone is happy with the different results of the plan that they're coming up with. So it's a huge project that's been going on for a while, so hopefully we'll see more information coming out, but it's still months off would be my guess. Okay. All right, so we have Whip Tongue checking in from Brazil, so welcome. I have one of my college roommates lives in Sao Paulo now. He and his wife work at the embassy. All right. All right, just reading through comments. Okay. Okay, so we see a question. Is there a way to select pads for sample editing via MIDI and not with the mouse in Groove Agent? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look. Hang on just 1 second. I have to send a quick message. Okay. All right, so let me just open up instance of Groove Agent here. So okay, so let's say we have all right, so so any way to select the pads for sample editing via MIDI and not with the mouse in Groove Agent. Okay, so let me just see. I thought there might be a way of doing this. Let me just. All right, so if I wanted to just have that selected. Let me just. I thought there was a way to. Like a little MIDI catch thing. Okay, so okay, so if you activate up at the top here, MIDI follow on off. So right now, this will stay when I click on with the mouse. But if I hit it with a MIDI note, that stays the same. But if I enable MIDI follow on off, as soon as I hit the MIDI note, the edit window, like the main window here, will just reflect based on the MIDI message that it's receiving. So right up top of Groove Agent, MIDI follow on off. And I think that's how, I think that should help. If I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. Okay. Thanks again for all the wonderful questions. All right. All right, so just reading lots of great discussions. See comment from John Costigan. Hi, Greg. If you didn't have an occasional brain cramp, you wouldn't learn half as much about troubleshooting as you know in your sleep. Mono and stereo Groove Agent 5 outputs rendering. So I know I've done a video on it. So if you go to the Cubase Q&A, I think it's working with mono and stereo tracks. But yeah, it happens. Okay, so we have a question. What is the quickest way to detect transients and remove bleed, like kick drum mic picking up too much snare? I've been cutting each track hit manually. So a lot of times, you could just come over here and just, using a gate is always a great choice, because if we come to, let's jump to, I'll play just a slightly different project here. Okay, just remove the markers here. Okay, so let's say if I was listening to my kick mic, so let's say maybe a sub kick. And here we could hear kind of the snare. So there's some more outside. And just kind of being able to, if you come here, you could set, the frequency that you want to, so you could actually gate out like, particular frequencies that you want as well. So, just kind of using, so let's say, so I'll bypass this. But just kind of turning on, but you could just kind of use different filter frequencies just to kind of get, the particular frequency range if you're looking to get like the hi-hat or snare out of it. So, but just, doing a gate. You can, do quite a bit, but a lot of people miss kind of the frequency filters on the noise gate. And it's like so helpful for like drum situations like you describe. Okay. See, just a great message from Lawrence. Can't wait to be able to play music with someone other than my iPad. So. Okay, lots of wonderful questions. Okay, great to see JVI on the Hangout. All right, so question from Michael. Do you like rack modules or do you think they're not worth it? So I have a lot of rack modules. If I look at my rack that's like 8 feet tall, I have a lot of rack modules that I collected over the years and used to use. Like my first rack module was probably 91 or 90. Yeah, maybe 89 or 90. And I just tend to keep all my gear forever. So I have a lot, probably I think between all my synths external, I probably have 22 or 23 external instruments. I don't think I actually, when I moved into my new studio, I have them on a separate power strip, so that I don't have to have them on because, I haven't used them in a long time. It used to be like for the longest time, there's one pad sound on my Roland JD800 that I had that was like perfect for so many little things. And, I have Kurzweils and Rolands and Korgs and Yamahas and Emus and different samplers, but I really haven't used them in a long time. It's just inconvenient. So, some people and, however you get your sounds are great, but I think that, for me in my workflow, I haven't used a rack module, in a relevant way in a really long time. All right, great to see Matthias from Hamburg on Hangout. Welcome. Okay. You see that Michael Teams is indicating that Gareth is famous again. That's good to know. We can say we knew him when. Okay, so I just see about the MIDI sends I showed earlier. It says from JVI, it says you also showed the MIDI sends also doesn't work with third-party plugins. Is there any update to the MIDI bus to resolve all this? So, the MIDI sends do work with third-party MIDI plugins. So let me see if I have one. I'm not sure if I even have a third-party instrument on here. Okay, so let's say I have towel noisemaker. So I will just come over here. And I will just take this and let's say I want to start off with a MIDI track. And let's add a instrument rack here. So I'll just say I'll just go to my VSTI here and let's add an instrument rack. So let's say I want this to be Retrolog. And check out some of the Imagineer presets. It's a new library from Online Music Foundry. It's always stellar stuff. So let's say... And let's say I had another instrument here, so I'll do my third-party one. I believe that we could do this without... So let's say I have my towel noisemaker, so now I could play this one. So let's say I have that going on. And let me just find a volume for that. Okay, so I will just kind of come over here. Okay, so now I'm going to play the retrolog. And I wanted to do an arpeggio out to the towel noisemaker, so I will go to the MIDI sends and say I wanted this to go out to towel noisemaker, and I wanted this to be maybe an Apache. So that way I could just kind of come right over here, say so we hear the arpeggiator. I'll just turn this down to less bothersome. Sorry about that. So let's say I'll just have this volume down. So now, that way you could hear the arpeggiator going on and the towel synth. So, but I have had discussions about kind of like being able to send, like a MIDI bus. I don't have any information I could share with you on that. Okay, so a question. I'm a new Cubase user. How can I save sampler track presets with my own samples to use at a later date? All right, so let's say I wanted to come here. I wanted to now just take one particular sample. So let's say I'll just... All right, so I'll just do this here. So I'll just choose to... So this is just its own file. I'll take my sampler track, and let's say this is just like a kick. Okay, so I have this as my sample, and all you have to do is come right here and you'll see preset name, and then you could save a track preset. So I'll just come right over here. We'll call it ADT PUK, I guess. All right, and now this is just a sampler track preset. So if you wanted to, again, just come over here to say Media Bay, user presets, and then you could just say VST instruments, and or I think we could even just see it in the full. So at this point, you can say presets. Let me just see if it's in. But you could now come over here, say users, and then you'll see it in like sampler track presets. And then you'll be able to kind of just find it in there. So let's see if we could. But that's really all you had to do is just kind of save it as your sampler track preset. And now you can see it just even will just kind of show up here. So let's go ahead and I'll delete this particular sample track. So we'll remove, and then I could add track using track preset. And then we could look for sampler tracks, and there you go. So just come right over here, and you could save it as basically just a track preset. And that would include all of your effects and your other information. So. Okay, so you see I use chord pads with string libraries, and I know each chord note goes to a different MIDI channel. Is there a way to send CC1 while using all pads to all 4 channels? All right, so let's say if I have, I'll just do a new project here quickly. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Hope everyone has learned a tip or trick today. If you have, make sure that you hit the like button and you subscribe to the channel. All right. All right, so I'll just do a quick Halley and Sonic. All right, so say I'll just come here. Okay, so I don't think that by default it's going to split it to multiple channels. But let's say if I'm here and I have my chord pads open, and I now and I'll just set my chord pads as my MIDI input. So if I wanted to just record this, you know, I think it's all going on the same MIDI channel, but I'll just come here. All right, so now when we want to look at, we could see all of our chords, and I will just look at it, but you know, I moved my modulation wheel. So, you know, if I just recorded the data, you know, it should, as we have this set, you know, we could just have that automatically, you know, if I had my MIDI input set to the chord pads, but you could, you know, simply, I'll just set this to all MIDI inputs instead of the chord pads. So if I'm here, I could just play the notes. And let me just have the chord pads open. And you can see the modulation wheel moving. So whatever tracks you have selected or tracks, all of this, and that patch doesn't necessarily respond, but that patch will automatically record the MIDI CC data and the chords for you. So, but let me know if I'm misunderstanding. All right. So we have hi Greg from Zephyrilus. Sorry for, I'm sure I mispronounced that. Any advice on how to set up a vocal chain would be appreciated. Thanks for these sessions. I've learned a great deal from your expertise. I'm glad it's been helpful. Let's go ahead and I'll just show maybe just a quick project. And I think I try not to do the same thing over and over again with vocals. You know, I tried to think of vocals as being more for, you know, I see so many people that, over the years that, are like white hot producers, and they have a formula and they do the same formula over and over again. And then someone else came out with something new. And they just kind of keep doing the same thing. But they don't really approach it as a solution for the song. So I'll show a couple things that I will usually have. I try to be a bit sparing, and obviously, if you have the perfect microphone and a great vocalist, that makes your job so much easier. One of my dear friends is, did a lot of engineering for James Taylor in his studio. And, one of my favorite quotes from my friend was, it's like, yeah, you could put up a Shure SM57 and it's going to sound amazingly like James Taylor, sounding amazing. So like, just with a great musician, you can throw any mic up. And I've been in sessions, I remember doing a session with Paul Carrick, who's in Squeeze and, and other groups, and, just a fabulous singer, and, just a 57 in a control room, while the monitors are playing, and he just totally nailed a vocal, and it was, unbelievable. So, every vocal could present different things. So, I like to try to EQ for, often taking out low end. So let's say if I wanted to just listen. So let's listen to this. I'll just do a little bit of low cut. I turn it up, you wouldn't mind. Like where we hear those, like the breaths. That was okay. So I could just kind of do my low cut filter. I was so naive. And then often I try to find like the key of the song. And one of the great things is in Cubase, you can say, oh, this is in, I could look at the chord track. So say this is an A flat. So I could come over here and just say for the frequency, I want this to be, A flat 6. Something about that just sounds so wrong. A flat 7. And so many people just put a general EQ on, but I try to EQ to make the harmonics of all the parts kind of come out. So I want to know what chord the song is in so I could EQ appropriately. So not just, boost this frequency because, I did it on the last 10 records, because they're going to be singing different notes. So here I have just, a little bit of compression. So nothing. So if I want to do like really heavy handed. And a lot of people do really heavy handed compression, and then you have to do a lot of work cleaning up breaths that are kind of brought out. So just, tiny bit of compression. If you're hearing, stuff, that, going to the channel strip, some people I know will do lots of noise gates. If you have like headphone bleed. Suddenly it's Beatles or Stones. Something about that just sounds so wrong. I will tend to put, and I find that, especially now, it used to be like in the 80s, late 80s, there was a lot of effects processing because you could get new sounds that you couldn't get otherwise. So now, there's kind of a tendency to have stuff a bit drier. So having less reverb, if you have a delay, make sure that the delay is timed musically and in sync. And do stuff like a dotted quarter note delay so it's not so predictable and obvious, but those little things, I try to be very light-handed with the vocals. And, that tends to, I think, work pretty well. And it could be the material I get as well as pretty decently recorded. But, sometimes I see people's projects and they have, literally like, 20 different plugins on a lead vocal, and everything is, this plugin may make sense in isolation and fixes something. And then, another plugin 2 fixes another thing, but plugin 3 negates plugins 1 and 2. So, just try to keep it very simple, I find. But so that's how I would approach some vocals. All right. So I know we had a couple of questions that were mailed in. Let me see if I get to those before we run out of time. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay. Okay, so we had a question. Where do the files go when you delete them from the pool? Are they deleted the same way as if you delete them from the trash in the pool? If they are permanently gone, is there a better way to delete them permanently from the computer? All right. So when we come over here, so let's say if I did a recording. Okay, so I'll just come here, I'll do new project. All right, so let me just put it into a specific folder that I know where it's going. So we'll say March 9th, new folder. Okay. So I will add a couple audio tracks and let's arm all these tracks. And now all right, for some reason my computer doesn't want to record today. All right, so let's say if I recorded tracks, then when we delete them in the pool, so generally they'll show up in the pool window. So I'll just drag some audio files in here. Okay, and okay, so now when I'm here, I will choose to go to my pool window and we'll see these files. Okay, so as we've done this, all right, so if I delete these from the pool, I could just say, right click and I could choose to, come right over here and let's say I just, as my files are deleted, so I will come here, delete those files. We'll go to our pool window. And now we could say, remove, sorry, that's annoying. I will just say remove unused media. So here we could remove it from the pool or put it in the trash. So if I say put it in the trash, now I have all these files that are in the trash. And if I wanted to, and let's take a quick look at our pool window here, our folder. So I will come back to documents. All right, so at this point, I would go to, let's say, March 9th. Okay, so when we go to this folder, delete me. So I see those audio files, and now I will come here and say empty trash. So at this point, I could remove from pool or erase the files. And then as we do this, we could see that the original audio files that we had there, are the ones that weren't there that are now just kind of removed. So we see that 4 of those files were removed. Okay, another question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to set up the quantize to accommodate dotted quarter note time signatures? So, with the quantized settings, even if it is a dotted quarter note, so like if you have a dotted quarter note equals the beat, it's still going to be the rhythmic value. So, it would be one beat, but the rhythmic value would be a dotted quarter note. So at that point, you would quantize to a dotted quarter note or quantize to an eighth note. So, regardless if it is, dotted quarter is the beat or a quarter note as a beat, it's still going to be the same actual value that you would use, the same rhythmic value that you use for the quantizing is applicable either way. So, it's still a dotted quarter note as it's notated and as it's played back, and that's what you'd want to use for quantizing for a dotted quarter, or an eighth note is still an eighth note rhythmically. So it may be, a third of the beat or, half of a beat, but it's still the same notated, so you want to think of the quantized value as, the notated value that would be written. So it would be kind of still the same. All right, we have just a minute or two left. I was lucky my wife was able to get home to pick up my son from the bus stop, so it gave us some more time. So thanks to my wife for that. Okay. All right, great to see David Reuter and Kristen Parisi from Nashville. Miss seeing you guys. Hope you're doing well. I enjoy seeing your trout you've been catching, your fish, and congratulations on your new grandchild. All right, my chat field just jumped. All right, so we have a minute or two left. Let me see if I can get back in time. All right. All right. All right. So I just see, can you go through chord assistance, please? All right. So if we have a chord track, we'll do this, and this may be the only, we'll have to wrap up probably after this. Thanks everyone for the great questions. And so let's say I'm doing a chord, right? And let's say, okay, we'll be in D minor. We'll add another chord. So we'll make this a G minor. And then I wanted to end on an A minor chord. So I could come here and let's say I have these chords, but I want a chord to go kind of in between that makes musical sense. So if I have this as an X, I could double click and go to the chord assistant, and we could see this by different levels of complexity, and we could base this based on common chord notes or cadences, which are kind of common chord progressions. But you could also see this visually, graphically. So you could say, okay, we're in, so I could see kind of the chords that would make sense kind of, before and after. So if as soon as I come here, go to the chord assistant, or we could see this as based on circle of fifths. So you could have, and this is how like many jazz songs are just kind of created. They just kind of go around a circle of fifths, do a turnaround, and kind of get back to the home tonic chord and be able to go around. So that will give you some, interesting perspectives that you could try to audition through. All right, we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for the wonderful questions. We'll be doing the next live stream on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. It'll be the same time as it was today. So for those that we know that there's different daylight saving times, so just be aware of that. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone on the next Hangout. Thank you for wonderful questions and a great live stream. Take care.